All 4 seasons of Farscape are filled with colorful and compelling characters, but certain figures stand out among the rest in the sprawling fictitious universe. Running between 1999 and 2003, Farscape was one of the most underappreciated sci-fi shows but is still championed by its devoted fan base. Farscape put a fresh spin on overused sci-fi tropes while also staying true to its space opera label. Although there were several reasons the show is so enjoyable, the chemistry that exists between the various members of the Farscape cast is one of the biggest factors. Farscape centers around Ben Browder's John Crichton, an astronaut who has been flung to a distant part of space and stranded there. The show chronicles Crichton's attempts to return to Earth, but the task is very often shelved in favor of trying to survive alongside his newfound family. The show is a co-production between various studios, one of which is the Jim Henson Company, an organization most known for its work on the Muppets franchise. As such, Farscape features several characters played by impressive puppets, which adds a unique feel to the show. Farscape is so densely populated that naming the best 10 characters becomes a Herculean task. Therefore, there are a couple of major players who don't quite make the cut. For instance, while it's impossible to deny how fascinating the concept of a living ship is, Moya's characterization was always limited by her restrictive communication abilities. So, the show's primary Leviathan doesn't rank here. Similarly, Paul Goddard Stark was a great character, but there were already others of a similar archetype, and they did it better. 10. Talin. Moya's son has a very interesting origin and arc. Although Moya doesn't quite make the list of top 10 Farscape characters, her son offers something extra that makes him fascinating enough to put him ahead of his mother. As a Leviathan Peacekeeper hybrid, Talin boasts all the strengths of both backgrounds with none of the weaknesses. From a purely canonical aspect, he is a brilliantly designed character, and his Peacekeeper aesthetic gives him an even bigger edge. However, Talin also displays a surprising amount of personality for a vessel. Just like a traditional child, Talin often disregards authority and often thinks he knows better than his mother. Being so headstrong lands Talin in huge amounts of danger, but his unique abilities are almost always enough to get him out of any scrape he lands himself in. Just like his eventual captain pilot, Lonnie Tupu's Biola Craze, Talin's loyalties shift quite often. Although Talin never truly becomes a villain, his allegiance to Craze starts to make things difficult at points, leading to some great storylines. Their shared fate cements an ultimate bittersweet redemption. 9. Biola Craze. Played by Lonnie Tupu. Craze and Talin eventually start to come as a pair, and Tupu's character becomes an uneasy ally of Moya and her crew. What separates Craze from his ship is that the captain begins Farscape as the story's primary antagonist. Watching the Peacekeeper gradually transform from a self-assured leader into an obsessive wreck as he feverishly tries to track down John Crichton is one of the best performances in the show. Unfortunately, Craze loses a few points for leveling out into a more predictable character. After stealing Moya's baby at the end of Farscape Season 1, Craze becomes much easier to read, for the most part. There are still moments that take the audience by surprise, but he never quite recaptures the same interest as he did pre-defection. Craze is still a very good character, but he's a victim of his earlier storylines. 8. Kyanna. Played by Gigi Edgley. Like several other members of Moya's crew, Kyanna entered the story as a prisoner. Unlike the others, she was being held captive by her own people, which immediately made her a very interesting character. After being freed by Crichton and the others, Edgley's character quickly integrated herself among her new allies, the group that would eventually become her closest friends. Watching her journey from a skittish loner into a textbook team player is incredibly rewarding, and her arc is expertly written. Farscape's alien characters stand apart from their counterparts in many other sci-fi shows. They not only look fantastic but often their mannerisms and overall demeanors are recognizably not of this earth. Gigi Edgley's performance as Kyanna is one of the best examples of Farscape's illusion of actual alien life. Everything from the way she moves her body to how she delivers her lines just screams sci-fi, selling the lie perfectly. 7. K.A. Diago. Played by Anthony Simcoe. Moya's resident Luxon makes his species proud by also being the ship's fiercest warrior. As the show's answer to Star Trek's Klingons, the Luxons live for the thrill of battle, but Diago's species ends up being a little more nuanced than their inter-franchise counterparts. On the surface, Simcoe's character is all aggression and bravado, but after getting to know him just a little it turns out that he has an immense capacity for loyalty, friendship, and love. As well as looking great and being an interesting character in his own right, Diago teaches the audience and his fellow crewmates a lot about the Luxon species. The race of Simcoe's character is one of the most fleshed out in all of Farscape, and all that lore helps contextualize his character even more than he does on an episode-by-episode basis. As an added bonus, his Qualter blade is very cool. 6. Payuzoto Jaan. played by Virginia Hay. With all the chaos, violence, quirkiness, and quips that give Farscape its signature appeal, it can be easy to get lost among it all. Jaran is the port in the storm of it all, not just for those aboard Moya, but also for those watching the show. She is the spiritual leader aboard the ship, and also the closest thing they have to a doctor. She is heavily relied upon for medical care and general advice, but asks for nothing in return. Jaran's background as a Delvian priest is what gives her such tranquility and a general aversion to violence, but Farscape's world-building around her character doesn't end there. It's eventually revealed near the end of Farscape Season 1 that Hay's character is a plant-based lifeform. Such a development doesn't just improve Jaran as a figure of interest but also the entire show and its associated lore. 5. Erin's son. Played by Claudia Black. Erin's forced defection from the Peacekeepers is what initiates her Farscape arc, and it allows her character to change and grow a great deal throughout the show. Although she remains resistant to her new life for a long while, her instincts for self-preservation allow for a gradual and very rewarding redemption story. Away from her own kind, she is almost a counterpart to Crichton, although she has vastly more experience with the space around them. Regardless, her outward appearance looking so human basically makes her Farscape's secondary protagonist, but one who actually knows what she's doing.